Hey you're finally awake. You're probably wondering how you got to this train station. Well, I can tell you one thing for sure, I definitely didn't put anything in your drink last night.
Zip zop zoobity-bop!
But I mean, hey, since you're here, let me tell you a little bit about where we are. Welcome to Duffield Bank Railway, the most famous and historically important train-related landmark in the entire United Kingdom. Just kidding. This place is about as historically significant as Simon Affleck. Who is that, you may ask? Exactly. He was a Swedish tax collector, and who the hell cares about that? Duffield Bank Railway was constructed in 1874 over the course of 7 years in the hillside of Duffield by a man named Sir Arthur Percival Haywood. Now my man Arthur's life was kind of bipolar in terms of success and failure. From a young age he worked with metal and railways because his father worked with Oriental metal and the Haywood family was fairly wealthy at the time. Unfortunately, their wealth and experience with railways came from their involvement with the transatlantic slave trade.
Alright, son. Today I'm going to teach you how to drive a rail spike. Just take a dandy sledgehammer here, aim it at the spike, bring it high over your shoulders like so, and drive it clean into the ground. Now you try. Faster, you yellow belly son of a... Oh, sorry, son. Force of habit.
As Arthur entered his young adulthood, he wanted to make a railway big enough for his younger siblings to ride on. So he made a 9-inch gauge railway with a functional steam locomotive and train. With plenty of experience already under his belt as a railway guy, he headed off to 3 different colleges and graduated in 1872 with a master's degree in applied science. That sounds great, right? Arthur had a bright future ahead of him as a professional railway engineer and a degree behind him to prove it. He then decides to do what any rational person would do in this position: marry his cousin Margaret Effie and set up shop in the cliffside of Duffield. Alright, I get that marrying your cousin back then wasn't all that uncommon, but that's not even the strangest part about Arthur's story. I'm no expert in railways or locomotives to any degree, but wouldn't you expect it to be easier to construct a railway in a nice level area instead of a steep cliffside? My source claims that the location, a steep hillside, was an ideal testing ground, but I'm starting to get the idea that Arthur was just an ambitious mountain goat in disguise. You know, the ones that enjoy casually standing on walls that are like 89 degrees upright for fun. Anyways, Arthur didn't want to make just any standard railway. No sir. This quirked up white boy had an idea in mind, a small idea. He saw failed railway experiments being performed by the Royal Engineers for warfare purposes, and thought he could optimize it for himself. Arthur wanted to create what was called the minimum gauge railway, which is just a fancy way to say the smallest possible width for a railway. His final decision for the minimum gauge was 15 inches. That's right, just over a 1-foot wide railway. Literally smaller than a Minecraft cart. Just an FYI, the standard gauge for a railway is about 56 inches, more than quadruple the size Arthur wanted to work with. I'd like to imagine he was just at a meeting with the other railway engineers and he was like, "Hey guys, I've been thinking, what if we tried making the standard railway to be 15-inch gauge? It'll be more efficient for carrying crops and weaponry."
15-inch gauge? That's much too small. No, it isn't. It's average-sized.
And then he just stormed off and carried on anyway. Arthur Haywood worked on the Duffield Bank Railway line until it was about a mile long and had 6 stations. Over the course of its time, it saw 3 different little Thomas the Tank Engine locomotives. The first was a 040 tank named after Arthur's wife, Effie. The 040 term essentially means that it had 4 wheels and 2 axles. Here's a picture of Arthur himself standing next to it. Handsome devil. The other 2 locomotives were named Ella and Muriel respectively. Ella was a 060 model locomotive, which means it had 6 wheels and 3 axles, while Muriel was a larger 080 model, which had 8 wheels and 4 axles. Sadly, during its 40-plus year lifetime, the Duffield Bank Railway line was never really appreciated by many. Despite having carts for passengers, a dining cart, and even a bathroom cart, the only people who ever really rode it were family members. The railway frequently had viewers such as entrepreneurs and military, but the only person who ever actually took interest was the Duke of Westminster, who asked Arthur to build another minimum gauge railway in Eaton Hall of Cheshire. Finally seeing success from his endeavors after nearly 22 years, Arthur was finally able to create a railway for someone else in 1896. I won't dive into Eaton Hall Railway because that's a whole nother video, but it was more successful than the trial run that was Duffield Bank Railway. Overall, it seems like Arthur's first railway was more of a trial run to find out if minimum gauge railways were actually viable. Think of it as like an extreme version of his cover letter or resume, except everyone who saw it was like, "Damn bro, that's crazy," and left him on red. Arthur Haywood passed away about 20 years after he opened Eaton Hall Railway in 1916, and Duffield Bank Railway was abandoned along with him. It's kind of depressing to hear that his first railway was just immediately stopped after his death, but it's not all bad. The supplies from Duffield Bank were salvaged by another railway called Ravenglass and Eskdale, which were currently undergoing a gauge conversion anyway. And most of Arthur's locomotives were either converted or scrapped for parts later. I'd like to hope that he would at least be happy knowing that his railway acted as a mechanical organ donor. Eaton Hall Railway remained open for around 30 more years after Mr. Haywood's death, carrying lumber and other materials around. His work even inspired another 15-inch gauge railway called Perry Grove Railway to be built in 1933, which is still open today. That's all I have to say about Duffield Bank Railway, though. If you'd like to read more about it, I'll put a link to the article in the description. This lesson is brought to you by Storm 308. Thanks for watching.